I believe Brandy is in the background here. She's not going to be on a camera or anything, but she will be in the chat for you guys. And I will now get us into day 3 of 5 and 5. Here you guys go. I will talk to you tomorrow at 11 o'clock Eastern. And again, I'll be on and off in the chat. So if you haven't been on for days 1 or 2, or you forget who we were talking about, we are working with our friend Reese here. Reese is age 37. She lives in Charlotte, North Carolina. She is an account manager at Bank of America, and her main complaints are fertility issues, moodiness, and fatigue. So remember, for all of these 5 days, these labs are all centered around Reese. They're not random labs. They all are for her. Like I said, she's 37 years old. She just got married about 5 years ago, and she and her husband have been trying to conceive for the past 3 years. So far, they haven't had any luck, and Reese has been to the doctor, and her reproductive organs are looking good. Reese was a competitive bodybuilder for about a decade, and from the time she was 18 till about 28, she was doing that. Now, at that time, she met her husband, and she decided her competitive days were behind her. At the same time, Reese still maintained a rigorous workout and weightlifting routine, and since this is baked into her life and identity, she doesn't really want to stop this. She also struggles with her body image now that she is no longer in competition shape. She has maintained a low body fat percentage, around 15%, which is low for women, for most of her adult life, and she has a hard time allowing herself to adopt a different body composition. She suffers from body dysmorphia, and dysmorphia in that a higher body fat percentage feels repulsive to her, and she doesn't want her body composition to change too dramatically. This was also a huge issue around them trying to conceive. Remember, we said about Reese, they have like their intimate time, let's put it that way, scheduled. It's not very romantic anymore. And the longer they try to conceive and can't, the more stressful that it is. So it's kind of just getting worse and worse. And so that's Reese. That's who we're working with. Now, yesterday, we went over the MWP with Kurt Stratman. So Kurt did a great job yesterday. We talked about a few things on there. I'll give you some quick notes from that one. We saw that her indican is high. And remember, this is a marker that can help you identify how well they're breaking down protein, which can indicate quite a few things. So the indican is high, pointing toward the idea of impaired digestion overall. This is 1/3 of the digestion picture, though. We have to consider the inflammatory bowel possibility, slow motility, or hypochlorhydria, which is low stomach acid, or all of the above. All of them could be a possibility. There was also low total bile acids, and it's looking towards the idea of gallbladder insufficiency, but we don't want to rule out impaired detoxification, especially since we saw low hormones on the first test. And you'll notice something that Kurt did the first day that Courtney will probably do today, or Kurt did the second day, that Courtney will probably do today as well. All of our clinical advisors and mentors reference the other labs. We're constantly looking for clues by looking at a variety of different labs. She had elevated 8-OHDG, indicating the need for oxidative support, and it's consistent with some of her oxidative stress symptoms indicated on the MC scorecard. Courtney is one of our wonderful clinical advisors here at FDN. So, Courtney, have you gotten to introduce yourself yet or say hello?
I haven't, but hello, everyone. Glad to be here.
Okay. And you can see she has a lot of plaques and pictures behind her, so you know she's got to be smart, and she really is. We're looking forward to talking about the MBA test today. So, Courtney, I will gladly give this over to you for right now while I try to figure out my setup over here, and we can break down the MBA test, what markers these are, how they're relevant to Reese. I'm looking forward to hearing about this.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks, Evan. Okay, so we are looking at the mucosal barrier assessment, which is kind of a short test like the MWP that everyone looked at yesterday. But it gives us some really vital markers for understanding her mucosal barrier function, or basically what's going on inside the barrier of her gut. The markers we're looking at specifically are zonulin, histamine, DAO, which is short for diamine oxidase, and then we're looking at the ratio of histamine to DAO. So we'll go through these kind of each one by one, and then Tara, just interrupt or let me know if there's any questions that I'm missing in the chat as we kind of go through these. So first, when it comes to zonulin, this is basically a protein that helps to regulate the opening and closing of the tight junction spaces between the enterocytes, which are the cells that make up the mucosal barrier or the gut lining. And so what we're seeing here with Reese is that she's got a value that's coming out quite high. It's above range. So the bar that you're looking at for each of these markers is pretty intuitive. Generally speaking, anything in the green zone is good, normal, optimal range. Yellow is starting to indicate that we're moving in a direction of not so ideal or more problematic. And then red is going to be definitely, we've got some issues going on. So she's definitely in the red. And with zonulin, again, the bar is pretty intuitive. Green is good. Yellow is starting to indicate some issues. Red, obviously, we're definitely well over the optimal range. So for zonulin, this is a pretty slam dunk leaky gut indicator for us in functional diagnostic nutrition. If we see this starting to trend in the yellow or especially the red, we know we've got an issue with what we would call leaky gut, which means that there's essentially too much opening happening versus keeping those tight junctions more so on the closed end of things within the gut, allowing food particles, bacterial endotoxin, all kinds of things that shouldn't be leaking from within the gut out into the bloodstream, which is definitely going to lay the stage for immune provocation, dysregulation, starting to turn on, potential autoimmune signals even in the body. So we're definitely seeing this happen in Reese's case. And this, I'm going to be looking for correlation with on the GI map, which I believe is a test that we haven't gone through yet in the 5 and 5, have we? That's coming up, right, Evan?
That'll be tomorrow.
Okay. So something I'm going to be looking with is correlation on her, what's going on with basically the gut flora, the microbiome. Are there, signs of dysbiosis, basically disruptions between the good and the bad bacterial balance of the gut? Are we seeing any, hidden parasites or other types of microbes that we don't necessarily want to have show up on a stool test like that? That could indicate that we've got some sort of potential like endotoxin production that's also driving some of the zonulin overproduction and leakage. Something that also is very much connected to zonulin that you may or may not be aware of is even just consumption of wheat, right, is shown in like Dr. Tom O'Brien's work to actually upregulate zonulin production in the majority of the population, even healthy subjects that don't show necessarily signs of GI distress. And so this would be something I'd be looking for, just signs of food sensitivities, or even, on something like the MRT, which is our preferred food sensitivity test. Is she showing lots of foods in the yellow or red that we would correlate back to elevated zonulin? The other thing I would be looking for too is correlation with the intestinal health markers on the GI map, as well as indican and urinary bile acids on the MWP, which we definitely took a look at. So, the fact that she's not digesting her protein, the fact that her bile acids are suboptimal, they're subpar, it looks like they're low, would to me be an indicator that she could be having both protein and fat maldigestion issues, which would set her up for having a more inflamed intestinal environment and leading to more possibility of leaky gut and upregulated zonulin, allowing those undigested food particles to escape the gut. Any questions so far on anything, Tara or Evan?
I might have one thing for you. We do have in the private Q&A, is this happening in the small or large intestine? Would a person with celiac disease or gluten sensitivity have a high zonulin level?
So yes, yes to the small intestine, and yes to the question about the celiac disease or gluten sensitivity. There often is a lot of correlation there. With, I'd say, celiac and gluten sensitivity, it all also depends on some level what's going on with that person's current exposure to gluten and wheat, and also what's going on with their microbiome in that environment. So it is possible, if you've got someone who's completely gotten wheat exposure out and enough time has passed and they've been able to heal, especially the small intestinal lining. And then on top of that, they've been able to balance out their gut microbiome and there isn't a lot of bacterial dysbiosis going on. You could actually see zonulin come back into range and see those markers normalize. But typically in a more active stage celiac or gluten wheat sensitivity individual, you are going to often see that correlation with high zonulin and then that active wheat gluten exposure in the diet.
Very cool. Another one here. Is there anything that may contribute to high zonulin in an acute sense? Something the client could have done that the day after alters their results. So that's a great question.
That is a great question. So I would think that a stress response could obviously upregulate zonulin, right? Like we always look for correlations with gut markers and our stress hormone profile and looking to see, are we seeing this picture of dysregulated HPA axis and high zonulin, or I'm sorry, high cortisol especially can often lead to gut barrier breakdown. It can start to, lead to things like leaky gut. So in that sense, yes, zonulin is a pretty, I would say, reactive marker. It can often move up and down quickly, just depending on what's going on with what the client's eating, what they're potentially reacting to. It all kind of depends, but I guess just from a day-to-day basis, the things that are probably going to move that needle mostly would be specific food triggers and then just life events that are causing a stress response.
Okay. And I did see another one. I'll go back in just a second, but I wanted to answer this first. Can we tell them again the name of this test? This is the MBA. So this is the one I made a joke about a few times. It's not a business degree, it's a mucosal barrier assessment. And this is also by Fluids IQ. Someone asked yesterday, are all the tests by Fluids IQ? No, it just so happened that day 1, 2, and 3 is. The rest of the tests for day 4 and 5 will not be by Fluids IQ. So this is the MBA by Fluids IQ. Next question here, if you don't mind, Courtney.
Yep.
Can someone have high zonulin levels without presenting symptoms?
Yes, absolutely. I would say that happens frequently. And I think some of that is also just connected to how in tune a client is with their body as well, just in my experience. So, um, it's also possible to have elevated zonulin and not have GI symptoms. That's quite common as well. And that kind of gets back to just that underlying component of leaky gut beneath so many chronic inflammatory conditions and especially autoimmune conditions. So you could have someone with migraine headaches potentially that has elevated zonulin. But I would say that majority of the time, especially in the early stages, if it's elevated and a client hasn't quite hit that tipping point with their health yet, where they're really aware that they're starting to slide down that HPA axis of dysfunction and they're feeling the burden of all of these symptoms, it will be elevated and they may not be noticing anything super significant or pronounced.
Yeah, and so that's what's kind of interesting about all this stuff. If someone's sick, we find a lot of stuff on the FDN labs. If someone thinks they're in a great state of health, we'll still probably find stuff to optimize on the FDN labs. Like we could, it stinks because who the heck really going to run tests when they feel great? Most of us get into this because we didn't feel great. But the truth of the matter is, if we took the average person that thinks they're in an okay state of health, we could prevent, I really believe this, we could prevent so much stuff by finding out what's on their labs and adjusting accordingly before that ever happens. There is. Oh, I'm sorry. Someone asked a question and said they waited till the very end without an answer. I guess this was yesterday. Is there a link you can send us for us to access that company, or is it just for FDN? It appears it is much cheaper to do the tests this way than the way I was trained. I'm sorry. I thought I did answer that one yesterday. So there's really no reason. I don't think it stops anyone from going to Fluids IQ. Yeah, I believe if you just go to their website, fluidsiq.com, you can create an account with them if you are some type of health professional. So if you're an FDN, you can absolutely do that. But I'm looking at, you seem like you have a bunch of credentials, my friend, behind your name. So I would assume that you're someone that would be able to do that. So of course, we recommend going through FDN to actually get the training on these things, obviously. But technically speaking, yes, you could go through it. I don't believe there's anything that stops you from doing that. And then we have one more for right now. Are you seeing an increased number of clients with breast implant illness with way above ranges in all three of these markers on here? So very specific question, but cool one.
Yeah, that is a cool question. I can't say I've honestly worked with that situation just in my own practice. And even thinking through clinical advising sessions I've done, I haven't seen that come up. Actually, I do take that back. I did have a client personally who did have breast cancer, and I believe it was before she got the implants, though we worked together. But I will tell you, she did have elevated zonulin. And so, what I'm going to say is that I think if the gut isn't in good shape and then you start to get foreign material put in the body, I mean, it's just going to elevate the chances that you could have inflammation and immune responses and just things happening there. I mean, I definitely think anytime we're introducing kind of exogenous things and materials, parts into the body, that's going to potentially be perceived as a threat, to the immune system.
And then we'll do, I'm not ignoring you guys. We'll do one other question for right now and we'll allow you to continue here because some of these questions would be answered just from continuing. But how do you take the sample for this test? Because I don't think it's going to be what people expect.
Oh, the sample for this test. Yeah, this is a blood spot test,
Mhm.
actually. So it's
Yep.
not fun to do, but it's easier than going to a phlebotomist and having your blood drawn.
Yep. And so
Oh,
again, I'm not ignoring you guys. I just want to make sure we're carrying along here. So Courtney, feel free to do your thing, and then we do have questions whenever you stop again. So maybe 5, 10 minutes from now.
okay, perfect. All right, let's tackle the marker histamine. So that's this middle marker here. So histamine is an inflammatory chemical that's produced mostly by degranulation of mast cells, which are specialized immune cells that live, in the lamina propria, which is one of the layers of the mucosal barrier. And basically, what's happening in the case where the mast cell is degranulated is often getting triggered by a foreign antigen or toxin that's trying to cross through, and it's basically this flushing response to get this foreign body essentially out of the system. And so we look at this as kind of an indicator of, okay, how much inflammation is, how much of an inflammatory kind of response is being driven in the mucosal barrier from these immune cells kind of sending off their signals, in this case mast cells, and what is that telling us about just the state of inflammation of this person's small intestine or their gut. And so this is often going to give us clues again, like zonulin, on do we have things that are starting to cross through the barrier that are causing this inflammatory response, whether that's, again, foreign food particles, bacterial endotoxin, any other kinds of toxins, right? That the body's essentially like, whoa, we don't want these in the system. Let's flush this out of here. Just in terms of correlating this with the other tests we do. So we're going to be correlating this again with something like the GI map, the stool test that you'll be covering later, and looking at different bacterial markers, especially opportunistic bacterial markers. Those opportunistic strains tend to be more of the endotoxin or LPS producers that are going to start to set off this type of histamine response. There are also specifically strains that produce more histamine and can add to histamine load in the gut. So those are things to be looking at on the stool test. Other things that I'd be looking for are markers like, say, calprotectin on the GI map, which is a general marker of inflammation. Are we seeing a similar story between high histamine and inflammation on the GI map? In this case, we're seeing, obviously, with Reese here, she's got not only a high degree of leaky gut with the elevated zonulin, but the histamine is putting a pretty strong inflammatory load on her gut as well. So I'd want to see if just we're seeing this consistent picture of inflammation across some of these tests. Are we also seeing secretory IgA, which is another marker on the GI map, elevated? That can give us a clue on, immune response and what's going on with inflammation that might be driven, from that angle as well. And then even cortisol levels on the stress hormone panel. If we're seeing, any markers that are especially high cortisol, which can happen, anywhere on that test, that could be causing more mast cell destabilization and driving more histamine release from the gut. Now, I believe on the SHP, did she have anything high, Evan? She didn't, did she? She exhaustive phase, right?
Yes, you're. It's so hard to pay attention while answering questions, but
Yeah.
she had a relative elevation for her afternoon thing, but otherwise nothing high.
Otherwise, no. Yeah, so on that particular test, we may not be seeing that there's a strong cortisol and MBA connection here between, cortisol driving histamine, but this is more than likely going to correlate once you look at the GI map and you start to see some of the different markers that are showing us a consistent picture of inflammation. Um, I think that's kind of the only other thing I want to note about histamine on a test like this is I find that this can also tend to drive more histamine response in response to things like right now it's like seasonal allergy season. You can sometimes see that correlation with clients that have a higher histamine showing up here and then being more reactive to pollens and just things in the environment that are going to potentially provoke them as well as certain foods, and especially like foods that are higher in natural histamine content, because the way the body works is these will all kind of layer on and it'll add to this collective histamine load, which will just start to create more and more of that inflammatory response with the immune system and just with their symptom load. Are there any questions coming up, Evan, that you wanted me
Oh,
to address?
there certainly are. They love it today. So
Okay.
this is kind of perfect for a test that's a little bit shorter. I'll go back to some of the ones that I answered directly just because I want the insight from someone like Courtney. These people that the clinical advisors, that is, are way better trained than myself. Um, Kelsey had asked, what would be some of the main symptoms to look for in a client with high zonulin? My original answer, Courtney, would be like, it might be greatly varied because you're talking about leaky gut more or less. So it's like, so what can't show up with leaky gut? But is there a better way to answer that, or was that kind of complete?
I think that would be a good answer, honestly. It can be anything from, I mean, I think any kind of immune dysregulation symptom, like anything autoimmune, I would almost just assume there's a zonulin, elevated zonulin or some type of leaky gut situation going on. But yeah, everything from food sensitivities to headaches to joint pain to, I mean, you name it, Evan, right? Like it can connect to all of those things.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned the autoimmunity because this is not even functional medicine. This isn't hippie science. This is right on PubMed, my friends. You can look up certain studies that show leaky gut is associated with almost every single autoimmune condition. And correlation is not causation. Any good science person knows that. But, if it quacks like a duck, I mean, it's probably a duck. Who knows? What do I know? I'm just the podcast guy. Anyway, what is a blood spot test and how is it done? This is just right on the finger, right? It's kind of equivalent to like a diabetic testing for their blood sugar. That simple.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
that's
It's like a finger prick test. You got to
yes. Now
milk your
what
finger. You got to run it under hot water and really get the blood flow and then milk it.
yes.
But
What do you
it's
think
easy.
oh, I'm sorry.
Go
I'm
ahead. Go
sorry, there's a
ahead.
bit of a delay. What do you think about the idea that almost everyone might have leaky gut in today's day and age?
Yeah, I think it's super, super common. I mean, I personally feel like unless you've gone down the rabbit hole and you've really empowered yourself to learn how to avoid inflammatory foods, how to eat real food that your body tolerates well, how to manage your stress levels, how to do all the things that we try to teach at FDN to support your health, you're fighting an uphill battle. I mean, I really feel, especially the younger generation of today, there's just so many things that are hitting them from the food supply to the environment that it's, I think in today's world, almost a given that a lot of people are going to have some degree of leaky gut.
Yeah, and again, not an opinion. All some things that, or all things that can be found right on PubMed. It shows that glyphosate actually increases intestinal permeability. So then, I mean, one of the things to ask is there anyone in, I mean, at least America, in some countries this is banned, so this really might not be relevant depending on where you're tuning in from. But in America, the rainwater has glyphosate, and it's like, oh, well, is that only in cities? No, there are studies showing that the rainwater in national parks that are completely far away from significant populations has glyphosate in it. That's how bad we've screwed up here. So it's like you really can't get away from it. And I'm not trying to fear monger. We can empower ourselves and we can take active steps to help with leaky gut. Thankfully, it's a very healable thing, right? Some of the fastest regenerating cells in the body are in the intestines, which is great. So there's stuff that we can do about it, but we need to be aware and assume what Lydia wrote. I think Lydia is totally correct. Yeah, most people have some level of increased intestinal permeability. I say increased because it's always somewhat permeable. It's not like perfectly solid, but it's increased. And then is that indicated in all these diseases? I mean, I think so. Yeah, and it's really something that's still not getting talked about nearly enough. It's a hot topic in our space. This is not something that 90+% of people know about, let alone can explain, right?
Yeah.
All
And I think a
right.
lot of it then comes down to epigenetics and, what those
Mm,
potential expressions might be, right? If you have leaky
of
gut.
course.
So, yeah.
Of course. Is it possible that some of these, this is a great question. Is it possible some of these things contribute to each other? Like too much histamine might mean elevated zonulin slash elevated histamine, or vice versa, I guess they were saying, on top of all the other inflammatory things going on?
100%. Yeah, it's like a chicken and egg, like once you've got elevated zonulin, you've got those tight junctions more open than they are closed, right? You've got this higher permeability in the gut. That's obviously going to allow things out that's going to start to degranulate the mast cells and release more histamine and provoke the immune system. When the histamine gets released, it creates more of an inflammatory environment in the gut. That inflammatory environment is going to favor dysbiotic bacterial species and be more favorable to, say, even things like intestinal parasites and toxins. It's kind of like, you know, I don't know if this is like more, we're kind of speaking terrain theory a little bit now here, Evan, but like that idea that when one thing goes bad, it can start to become this vicious cycle. And, you start to see almost like the bad guys in the neighborhood can move in easier because you've got leaky gut and now you've got, this inflammatory environment and you've got stress levels producing high cortisol. And so that's why we try to run all of these tests to get an idea of like, wow, how many factors are we seeing pop up that are kind of giving us a really compelling picture on like what are the different angles we have to work at here to help this person recover their health.
Yeah. And you don't mind the questions just keep coming along, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Cool. This is great. You guys are awesome, especially on a test that's this short. This is very useful for all of us. This is great. All of these lab exams can be easily accessed in the US, but other countries like Guatemala, for example, I'm not sure we can find labs that check all of those markers. So, what I want you to do, my friend, that just asked that, I just dropped an email for you in the chat below, fdninfo@aftnp.com. You would be very surprised what we can get and where we can get it. It's really, from my understanding, only certain countries in Asia that it's a huge issue. But Courtney, and I know that this is not your job here, so I don't want to put you on the spot, but are you aware of what this might look like in Guatemala specifically, or should they just do the email?
Yeah, honestly know what a good equivalent test would be.
Okay,
Yeah, I know Canada and the US can definitely get this test, but I'm not sure outside of that.
no worries.
Yeah.
Oh, good question. So a big theme every day, Courtney, has been explaining the differences between FDN optimal ranges and the ranges themselves. So is there
Uh,
anything we need to specify for the FDN optimal ranges on these markers? Great question, Kara.
Yeah, that is a great question. I didn't actually notate what our optimal ranges are for these. I will be dead set honest with you. But I do find that our optimal ranges tend to stick, at least with fluids IQ, the MWP and the MBA, this has been my experience, like pretty close to once we're seeing something cross into the yellow. I mean, that's already trending, in my opinion, outside of the optimal normal. When it's in the red, it's like a clear cut. Yeah, we got an
Mhm.
issue. So we haven't really gotten down to DAO yet, but I would consider this as definitely not optimal, even though Fluids IQ is considering this kind of still in the yellow zone, if you will. But yeah, if I would have known that question was coming, I certainly would have notated it, but I have the range. I just don't have it right in front of me.
Sure. Do you use this MBA test first, and if positive, then do the GI map? No, we're always going to do them together. And there's literally no better person than a clinical advisor to explain this. Why would we want to use both of those tests at the same time?
Because we're getting clues from both of them that can tell us if we're seeing the same story. And the GI map isn't going to necessarily look at zonulin specifically or histamine specifically. It will tell us which bacterial species might be elevated, right? And then we can take a look at those species and say, wow, are these guys, LPS producers? Do they also produce histamine? Are we seeing consistencies between these two tests? Do we have signs of, like digestive health markers suboptimal, like elastase 1? Are we seeing bugs like H. pylori, which we know drive down stomach acid? That would definitely correlate with a higher zonulin because we know there's some digestive dysfunction happening from the GI map end of things. Same thing with DAO. We haven't gotten into that. Maybe I should hold on this one until we talk about that marker. But basically, what I'm trying to say is we're going to be getting clues on what we know is happening in the gut based on what these markers are saying. And then we can look at another test that is cross correlating and see, are we seeing the same story there?
Yeah, Holly said if antibiotics contribute to leaky gut too. Yes, they do, Holly. I grew up in the generation where if you had a cold, then it's like, well, hey, it could turn into a sinus infection. Here's some amoxicillin. So I had 20 courses of antibiotics before the age of 18. So I'm a walking science experiment. I seem to have turned out all right. My face kind of droops to one side every now and then, but overall, I'm doing okay. And I say things like that too. So yes, they definitely contribute to leaky gut. We got to watch out for that. How can we get the testing equipment needed to test the blood sample? So this person, we were kind of having a conversation one-on-one to a degree in the chat. They're referring to the food sensitivity test. So really, if you did that, first of all, it's only available in the US and Canada anyway. So assuming that you're outside of the US or Canada based on how you're asking that, it wouldn't even matter. Then we would send you a food sensitivity test. That's another blood spot. So all of that can be done at home. If you are in the US or Canada, you don't need the equipment. We send them to a lab, and really anyone who's a phlebotomist, technically speaking, could do it. My sister is a nurse, and she is doing the MRT test right now, the day 5 test. And so she had her friend just literally take her blood, fellow nurse. So kind of cool.
That's cool.
You know what? We have so many questions coming in, which are awesome, but I feel like if I keep doing this, we're actually not going to get to your last marker there. So I hate to piss anyone off here, but do you want to just continue? And then we clearly have an abundance of questions. I'm looking at 20 new ones right now.
Yeah, that's great, Evan. I'll kind of go through it succinctly and then we can go back to
Okay,
questions. How does that sound?
sure. Thank you
Okay.
very much.
Yeah, absolutely. So DAO is the last marker we're looking at here, and then we'll touch on the histamine to DAO ratio. But DAO is an enzyme that's produced by the villi of the small intestine, which are these little hair-like projections that stick off of the mucosal barrier. They're responsible for helping to absorb food particles that are ideally broken down in their smallest state and draw them into the bloodstream to circulate to the cells to basically refuel the cells. And it's really important because DAO helps to counteract the effects of histamine. It basically is kind of the body's way of bringing down histamine load. And so when we're looking at kind of the idea of, all right, we've got this certain load of histamine in the gut, what is the capacity of the mucosal barrier to produce sufficient DAO to neutralize that histamine and keep it in check so inflammation doesn't go out of whack in the gut? This is essentially what we're looking at. And so generally with this number, the higher the better. So it's kind of got a reverse scale from some of these other ones. And we're seeing in Reese's case, she's starting to drop down into the yellow to trending on red end of things. And so what this indicates to us at FDN when we see this marker starting to drop low is we've got some degree of damage to the villi of the small intestine, which could come from so many things: inflammation, food sensitivities, poor upper GI function. Those are probably some of the three biggest, but of course it could be even just bad bugs in the gut, toxin exposure. All of those things can drive villus atrophy and drive DAO down. There's even some degree of even, genetic capacity to produce it. And some people, if they have certain genes expressed, will, just by definition, have a little bit less or suboptimal DAO production. But generally speaking, this one is a lot more dependent upon just those other factors like digestive capacity, diet, toxin exposure, dysbiosis in the gut, those types of things. Just in terms of correlating this with the other tests. So I'm definitely going to be looking at, markers of dysbiosis on the GI map, as well as the intestinal health markers like elastase 1. I'm going to be looking at whether or not this person has got a high anti-gliadin IgA, which is another marker on the GI map, because we know that things like wheat sensitivity and exposure can cause the villi to atrophy, right? And then cause that production to go down. So you definitely see this phenomenon in people with gluten sensitivity and celiac disease. Other things I'm going to be looking to correlate this with are things like indican and urinary bile acids on the MWP, because those are both markers of protein digestion and fat digestion and how well those macronutrients are getting broken down and may or may not be contributing to a more inflamed intestinal environment. Do you want me to touch on the histamine to DAO ratio real quick, Evan, before we go into questions, or you want to cover questions a little bit?
100%. Let's touch on it.
Okay, so kind of as I was hinting at just a bit earlier, what we really want to see in the context of both of these two markers is, do we have sufficient DAO to hold histamine in check? And so what's really nice about this Fluids IQ test is it'll actually calculate that for us. And so you can see in the case of Reese, she's really kind of trending into the problem zone here. She's got quite a bit of histamine, which we know is going to drive inflammation, and her DAO level is starting to struggle. So that sort of balance between the two is going to keep her more in that end of uncontrolled inflammation, because she's got too many factors driving histamine production and not enough health of the villi to produce enough DAO to counter that and keep her intestinal health more balanced, right, in terms of inflammation. Yeah, I think that's what I've got. If there's some questions that you want me to kind of tackle here.
Oh, we got plenty. This group is engaged today. All right, let's go. All right. What do you test for Hashimoto's autoimmune disease? So just so you know, Courtney, once we're past the test, technically any question goes, and I've told them that every day. So we'll get like business questions, we'll get this. So I know that we have a different perspective on this as an FDN, but
Yeah.
still, let's humor the question. What do you test for Hashimoto's autoimmune disease?
So I'm not sure if I totally understand the question, but I think, is the person asking, do we test to like diagnose Hashimoto's autoimmune thyroiditis? Is that how you would answer or interpret the question?
Actually, the way that I interpreted it is the diagnosis is already there. So
It's
which
there.
tests
Okay.
would we use? And of course, these people, through no fault of their own, they don't understand we're always going to use the foundationals.
That's exactly it. Yeah, I was going to say that. So yeah, so we always have to be very careful to say we don't test for anything specifically or treat anything specifically in our world at FDN, but we like to run these foundational labs on literally everyone and anyone who comes in, whether they've got a diagnosis or they've just got a cluster of symptoms that they're struggling with, because we want to look for clues that are going to build a compelling story that we see correlation back to their symptoms with. And so that helps us then with confidence understand and say, look, like, pretty high degree of probability because we're seeing, say, histamine high, you've got inflammation in the gut. We know inflammation in the gut is associated with Hashimoto's thyroiditis, in this case, in this particular question. We see zonulin high in this. Let's just say this was a Hashi's case, right? We know that there's association between leaky gut and any autoimmune condition. So this is a clue that we can work on in terms of the health optimization plan to support this person's body back to health, right?
Yeah, great. Have you ever seen a zonulin too low? And then what would that maybe indicate?
A zonulin too low. I don't think I've ever seen that, to be honest with you. Have you ever seen that, Evan?
I personally haven't, and honestly, off the top, because it's been so long since I would have reviewed it, since that never comes up, I can't even tell you what that would necessarily indicate offhand. Do you know?
I really don't know. I mean, I've certainly seen it
That shows how
normal.
rare it is.
I've seen it normal. And I will say this, now that we're talking about the zonulin marker, just for everyone out there, so you're aware, even if this was normal for Reese, let's say it was down in the green, I would still not rule out leaky gut in a case like that. Now, this is a slam dunk leaky gut if it's high, like it is for her, but if it's normal, zonulin by itself is not enough to rule out leaky gut. So it's a very useful marker. And often with leaky gut, you will see it elevated, but I've certainly seen it normal and then looked at, say, the GI map and seen other signs of leaky gut. So this is where we get a little more complex in our world, but I don't know that I've ever seen it too low necessarily, right?
Yep, no problem. Neither have I. How does this zonulin marker relate to the anti-gliadin IgA marker on the GI map?
So anti-gliadin Ig, I'm kind of stealing Brendan's fire a little bit here. That's okay. That's a marker that's actually kind of confirming we've got, a specific immunoglobulin IgA having activity against gliadin, which is a protein component of gluten. And so if we see that actually high on the GI map, we know for sure that the immune system is seeing that and it's mounting a response. 9 times out of 10, that's going to happen with that protein particle having leaked from the gut to activate the immune system. So if we see that zonulin is also high, that's confirming to us that we have leaky gut, we have wheat exposure, and now we have the immune system mounting a response to it. So hopefully I answered that question.
Yes, and just so you guys know what she was referring to when she said stealing Brendan's thunder, I know once we get to the top of the hour, sometimes people have to hop off. So tomorrow we'll be going over the GI map. That's a huge test that a lot of people know in our space, right? Sometimes they're just learning about these tests, but GI map's something everyone knows. And, I like to believe myself, Courtney, clinical advisors and mentors that we're all smart. And they're smart, and then there's like, dude, are you okay? Brendan's more in that second category. So if you like nerding out, this is the one to hop on. Brendan is so intelligent that at the age of 29, without a college degree, he was being hired to lecture to doctors about mold. So you'll learn a thing or two. Some of it will go over our heads, but we'll learn a thing or two as well. So definitely tune in tomorrow and day 5 as well. I know the US is crazy, so we always have to watch out for our food. Yes, we do. To my understanding, organic wheat products can't be sprayed with glyphosate. If anyone knows otherwise, let me know. Okay, so this is an interesting point, Maria, because I believe that by definition has to be correct. Because if I'm not mistaken, the only reason it can be sprayed with glyphosate is because it's genetically modified. Isn't that the whole point, Courtney? They genetically modify it so it doesn't completely die when you do
I
that.
believe so. Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah. Yes. Now here's the problem, Maria. Like I said, this isn't an opinion, right? It's in our rainwater. So if you're talking about any crop that is in natural like sunlight, you're going to have natural rain then too. So and this is a whole separate conversation. I don't mean to get controversial. I think all of us, even if we've seen people, or maybe it's been us, like benefit from a high or extreme keto or like a carnivore diet, we know it works. We get it. We all kind of understand that our ancestors were clearly not purely carnivore. Like we know this. Weston A. Price did his research. They were eating a variety of things, but it's working. Why is it working? It's because these plants, when they go through photosynthesis, they absorb toxins from the environment. So if there's heavy metals in the air and there's poison in the water, you can grow the most organic food that you want. But if it's exposed to all of that, it's going to pick those toxins up. So I am again, I don't mean to be controversial. Maybe I'll get some hate for this in the comments. Maybe I'll get some support. I don't know. I'm a little hesitant even with the organic stuff nowadays. I like to buy local. I like to buy sometimes like the hydroponic stuff. If I know someone's actually grown it indoors and then used certain things for it, I'm a little more happy to do that. Or if it was in more of a remote area, I think that's a good thing. Again, we know the national parks are exposed with glyphosate now. It sucks, but certainly that's better than buying something that was grown right outside of the city. So just something to keep in mind. All of this stuff gets chemicals, but Maria, I do agree. Obviously, I would rather have that. If I could only pick one, I would take that wheat any day of the week over one that is legitimately and not secretively, it's not a conspiracy theory, being doused in glyphosate to help them with their production. Absolutely insane. Would you check thyroid markers as well? This is from before. Would you check thyroid markers as well? It usually also affects thyroid function with leaky gut. What markers do you check if so?
Oh, for thyroid for this particular case. So
Yeah, sorry, this is like 10 minutes ago.
yeah, that's okay. Yeah, I mean, to me, this is kind of going back to the stress hormone panel a little bit more because I always like to consider thyroid when looking at hormones on top of all of these other things. But I mean, I think given the scenario here, we've got a woman who's unable to conceive. She's in the exhaustive phase of, HPA axis dysfunction. I think there's a high probability she has sluggish thyroid. So even though that's not a foundational test we run, this is where, again, getting more into the work of FDN, after you've run the foundational labs and you're looking at just how the client is presenting and asking yourself, like, what are any additional, like, pieces of information I need to know to really help this person? Yeah, I definitely think running a thyroid panel would be super helpful in a situation like this. And if things were out of range, supporting that would be super helpful in a situation like this, especially with fertility. So as far as the markers go, at a bare minimum, I would say TSH, free T3, free T4, ATPO, antithyroid globulin antibodies, and then reverse T3, right? Like those would be kind of the bare minimum. If you can at least get TSH, free T3, free T4, that would be at least a good start on thyroid, understanding what's going on there. So,
Mhm. Yeah, someone said, I know some products will have glyphosate testing too. They can certify there's no glyphosate. They certainly can, but can we certify that we don't have glyphosate? So Mosaic, formerly Great Plains, has a glyphosate test. I'll bet every dollar in my bank account, which is more than you'd expect, but not as much as I'd quite like, that every single person on here, if you live in America, and not everyone on this call is from America, I guarantee you have glyphosate that would show up in your urine test, unfortunately. So just something we got to work with, not fear mongering. It's just do what we got to do. Natalie said, I believe that a food item that is US certified organic symbol cannot be sprayed with glyphosate. Same in Canada. Yes, this is true. But again, when we've put so much into the environment that it keeps recirculating, these are the issues. I see people already had a full conversation about this when I brought it up before. So I'll try to skip over some of this. Not that I'm ignoring you guys. Let's go to the side Q&A. We had what are the optimal ranges for the test? We went over this. Can high zonulin and antiphospholipid syndrome be connected? Do you know anything about that?
antiphospholipid syndrome. I'm actually not familiar with that one, I got to
I
say.
can use context clues, but yes, I don't know either offhand. Good question.
Yeah.
I think at least. Are these tests better than the Everlywell tests? If a client had that test already, are findings normally comparable?
The Everlywell test. Yeah. So I'm not super familiar with those, but I will tell you, I've had experiences where some of my own practice clients have come in with having run those tests. I will say this, we tend to work with lab companies at FDN that have very high quality standards and try to, hold their testing to the gold standard. So I can't speak for the side of Everlywell. I don't know what all the markers are on their test, but part of the benefit of doing this process is that you really, at least going through the FDN training, is that you really learn what are the markers that we really want to look at? What are the gold standard markers to kind of give us a sense of what's going on with the mucosal barrier or, metabolic health or the gut, right? And so once you kind of start to understand that, it eliminates any potential like lab noise or some of these direct to consumer tests, which may or may not be giving validated markers. And again, I don't know about their testing technology and kind of how sensitive it is to some of these things.
I just like just super, super fast. I went to their website and just saw what they had. There's certain tests for like celiac and stuff. I haven't looked at those. I've
Yeah.
only been familiar with them in terms of their food sensitivity tests, which I'm not saying are inherently bad, but when you get to day 5, it's not against Everlywell, it's against really anything else. When we get to day 5, you will see why not all food sensitivity tests are created equal. I'll put it that way. And it's really not their fault because there's some good patents out there that only certain companies have.
Yeah.
Lydia said, oh, yeah, you got some? Do
Oh,
you
I
have
don't
something,
have
Courtney? Or
anything,
were you
Evan.
just
Yeah.
laughing? Oh,
No, I'm
okay.
just laughing. I'm just laughing. I'm
All right.
laughing with you. Yes.
Good. Lydia said, I was wondering, don't DAO enzymes help break down histamines? So, what does it mean when DAO is high and histamine is high in this case? Maybe it's not the same DAO?
Okay, so if DAO was high, actually on this test, we'd have it closer to the green end. So that would be a good thing. So generally, we want stronger levels of DAO to counteract the histamine. So yes, the thinking is right there. But if you think about it as, the health of the villi goes down, DAO production is also going to go down, and lower the DAO, the less of it is available to counteract higher amounts of histamine. So we want to actually see DAO high in proportion to histamine being high. Does that make sense? Hopefully.
I think so. I can't answer for her,
Okay.
but
Yeah.
oh, and Lydia just said in the chat, sorry, my bad, Courtney did not see the number there. That I actually totally understand that though, Lydia. It kind of throws you off because it's different.
Yep. Yep.
No problem. Answered that one. We had Linda say, many clients and patients are on a tight budget. Do you have general pricing availability? And then do you prioritize which tests seem more important? So I love the business questions ones. You can run your practice however you like. And there's a time and place to help people for one-off sessions with just health coaching and diet and lifestyle stuff. So that's very fair. And then there's a time and place where I know there's only so much I'm going to be able to do with the person unless we dive deep into the labs. So, Linda, something to understand, at least for FDN practitioners, by the time people get to someone like myself or my fiance, she's an FDN, this isn't the first place they've been to. They've done a lot. And usually they're actually more advanced than the average person. Like I'll have people that come to me, they're like, no, I've been gluten-free for 10 years. I've been eating organic, which might mean something, might not mean something. For 5 to 10 years, I go to bed at 9 p.m. and they're still sick. They've gotten better, but they're still sick. So it's almost like ethically, I don't even think I can fully help them without the labs. And the way that I word this, and I don't mean this cheesy, I don't mean this like a salesperson or whatever. We need to help people understand that this is an investment. If you're walking around, let's say, with like a severe autoimmune condition, or I'll take myself for an example, so it's a real one. I had severe cystic acne. That's not a dire condition, but it sucks. If I could have paid someone, if I had the money, $50,000 to get rid of that severe cystic acne, I would have paid them $50,000 in a heartbeat. I would have wrote the check. I would have went into debt for it. I would have done whatever I could. And I mean that seriously because my life legitimately is so much better without it. $50,000 doesn't even compare to the joy that I get from not walking around with that all day. So I understand that doesn't mean I can just pull out $50,000, but somewhere between that extreme and $0, some people really can get the things together if they try. We also have financing available as FDN. So it's called the Advanced Care Card. It allows our clients to finance our programs for 0% interest for 15 months. And again, that's not nothing. A $3,300 package, which is what I charge, generally speaking. I charge a little more for more sessions, a little less for certain things. That's still $220 a month. Some people can't even do that. I get it. But the way that I recommend doing this, and I said this on day one, and not everyone has to take this advice. Some people don't want to do this. This is fine. I believe that the things that I have in my life are a blessing. I don't believe that I'm fully responsible for all the good things that I've gotten. So because of that, I have faith that I give away 10% of everything that I do. That's not because I'm a saint or because I'm so great. It just makes the most sense to me. So what you can do, Linda, is you can charge the people who can pay for it and need it accordingly. And then the people that you really know want to do this, but simply cannot afford it at the time, we give out free memberships at my business all the time. We give free client sessions to people all the time, but we can only do that because we're making sure our cup's filled first. So I'll get off my soapbox. It's like I'm talking as if we don't have 40 other questions. But I just wanted to say all that stuff. Linda said, thank you. You are very welcome. Thank you for the question. Maria said, would you say that it's important to do these tests every year or every other year if the person wants to maintain their health long term? I mean, in a perfect world, right, Courtney?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, this is definitely just as useful for preventative measures as it is for someone who's sick, right?
Mhm. We got Carlos. Well, once you know what is the problem, once you know what is the problem is how you treat it. If you're not allowed to prescribe medication. So I didn't mean that in the funny way. That's literally how it's written. I'm guessing, obviously, English, not the first language. Um, how would you help all this stuff? I guess is what he's saying. If you're not allowed to prescribe medications, so obviously we're coming from a functional perspective. So the
Mhm.
functional perspective is a belief that the body's designed perfectly, and if we're giving the right input, the body should give us the correct output. And
Mhm.
how we view disease is not some ultimatum of your genetics that you're doomed to have. We view it as your body is actually doing the exact right thing based on the input. So even an autoimmune condition of the thyroid, someone might say, well, how can that be the right thing to do? Well, if your body's attacking stuff that it thinks is like foreign because it can attack gluten, it can attack certain parasites and bacteria, then it might attack the thyroid by accident, but it was really just trying to protect you. Someone might say, well, how is a tumor the right thing? Well, a tumor is just an accumulation of those toxic cells that are really dangerous for you. Again, the body's trying to do the right thing, but we have the wrong input. So, I don't know if you have anything more to add to that. That's just a philosophical difference. But remember, Carlos, if you didn't hear this already, we will be going over the protocol for all of these labs on Friday. It's going to be an awesome day. Definitely don't miss it. Sorry, I didn't mean to take over that answer too, but here we go. Right back to the chat. All right. How much does it cost a patient to come in and run the FDN5 tests and get a report of findings or a plan to correct their problem? I don't know. Maybe you don't feel comfortable with this, Courtney. If you don't, that is totally okay. You can give an average. I've already shared my practice, how we do between the very minimum for all 5 labs with our sessions is 3,300 up to 4,500. How do you work? Is it similar?
Yeah, it's similar. And again, yeah, I don't know what the exact like cost of all 5 tests are just right off the top of my head, but I think it kind of comes down to if you do more of like a say a 3-month program approach or a bundle of sessions plus testing approach, it's going to range, right, for all of us because that kind of comes down to how much do we want to incorporate for compensation of our time to sit and work with the client as well. But yeah, I would say from what I've seen, anywhere in the 2000s up to 4000 probably for at least a 3 to 4 month stint of working with them with testing and everything.
Thank you. Holly had asked, what is LPS? And then Tara answered in the chat, just so everyone can hear it, though. It's lipopolysaccharides.
Mhm.
Huge problem in leaky gut. That's what like if you guys heard of Megaspore, that's kind of one of their claims to fame is that Megaspore or spore-based probiotics are really great at reducing LPS, so can make people feel really good really fast. I went down the rabbit hole of leaky gut and found I need to become a monk living on top of a mountain to avoid leaky gut. That way, taking care of my physical, emotional, and spiritual health. They did have a laughing face, so it's like yes and no. I mean, if you really wanted to do that, you're kind of correct. I mean, our world is crazy, and some people can handle the craziness a lot better. Like their bodies genetically can handle a lot better. But I think if we empower people, educate people, and be leaders in the space through our examples every day, I genuinely believe that we can change this. But we better act quick. It's not a joke either. So that was funny though, Lydia. To be clear. The Okay, what else we got? What else we got? Sorry, some of these were just comments. Everyone's having a great time in the chat. Okay, here we go. In terms of why order all the tests at once instead of one, then another, then another, first, I imagine compliance increases if they can do it all at once. Secondly, I heard an FDN graduate explain it this way. It's like calling the police and having them look at one room of your house for an intruder. Let's look at all the rooms of your body for all invaders at the time. This was just a comment, but that's a great one, Dr. Kelly. Courtney, when someone might ask you about like, hey, why do I need all these labs at once? What would you like? How would you word that?
So, I mean, I tell my clients all the time, I don't want to miss something. Like if we could order just one lab, we could, but we'll get information that will help us and it will move the needle the right direction. But I mean, I will just say straight up, before I became an FDNP, I was an NTP. And with that background, I didn't know how to run this kind of functional testing. And I would get my clients to a point and then I'd be like, okay, we're stuck now. Now, what do we do? And so I think once you start to understand the value of testing and having that data to work with, now I feel like the nature of the person I'm working with is often complex enough. I don't want to miss something vital in the beginning of just starting that process with them. And then we get a certain ways down the road and they're disappointed and they're like frustrated because something's not working as well as they want to. So I think that's really the value of doing 4 or 5 tests, right? You're going to get a suite of data that is going to really be compelling and cohesive and explain a lot of what might be going on with that client. And so if they're going to make the investment, they know they're going to make the investment. And I feel like the cost between one test and say 4 tests, if that's what it comes down to, isn't often going to make or break it for a really dedicated person who wants answers.
Yeah, and what people have to remember, or maybe they're learning this for the first time, I shouldn't say remember, is this system at FDN was created after Reed Davis, the founder, literally worked with 10,000 people and their labs. So he was trying to figure out, this is basically how to think about it. We know that having no lab tests isn't great. You don't want zero. If someone had all the money in the world, you'd certainly want some labs. But then the question is, if someone really did have all the money in the world, would you run every test that you could possibly run? And I don't think that's the answer either. There's a law of diminishing returns here. So it's like, what is the most effective, actionable stuff to get anyone going in the right direction? And it's these tests. Now, he was starting this 20, 25 years ago. So some of the tests have been upgraded, if you will, over time. GI map wasn't available back then. So we went from stool culture testing to this PCR DNA testing that we'll talk about tomorrow. So they've been upgraded, but fundamentally the labs are the same thing. So these work very well. Is it perfect? No, it's not perfect. But the one cool thing about FDN that I don't know if anywhere else can say this, I have never in 8 years of doing this one time seen someone do all of the foundational labs, go through the protocols, and not get at least 60% better in the first 90 days. I have never seen that one time in 8 years of doing this. So you say 60%, well, is that amazing? It's not amazing per se. Some people want to get to 100, obviously. But the problem when we play guessing games with labs or pick and choose is some people get 0% better. I'd rather take the bet that, hey, I have a 100% chance of getting this person 60% better. They're probably going to like me still versus, yeah, I could gamble this and they might get 0% better. All right, what do we got? What do we got? What happens if someone's cortisol is super, super low? Would it affect some of these levels too? Is it possible for things to look quote unquote normal on the MBA?
On the MBA for things to look normal. Yeah, I mean, I've definitely seen normal levels of, I don't know about all of these markers, but like I've mentioned earlier, I've seen zonulin normal and then looked at a GI map and seen issues there. So it kind of all depends on, I think, diet and lifestyle factors for the client, kind of their level of knowledge. Um, to answer the question about it was a low cortisol, right, on the SHP and how that would impact the MBA.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, does that necessarily have an impact on any of these things? I mean, I think we're talking about a really depleted person. And so I would imagine, again, we're not going to get digestive markers per se with this test, but a lot of times if cortisol is really dropped off, we're going to see signs of weak digestion, low thyroid, all of these other things going on too. And I would imagine the body's going to have a hard time keeping inflammation in check in that case, right? So I would imagine histamine would be higher on a test like this. Now, again, we don't know for sure, but I'd be looking for signs of, yeah, poor digestion probably is going to elevate zonulin. I mean, kind of the presentation we're actually seeing here with Reese is quite likely because her SHP does show exhaustive phase cortisol. And, those people tend to be low in pancreatic enzymes, low in stomach acid, low in bile acid, right? Like they're not going to be digesting their food well. That could lead to elevated zonulin and contribute to leaky gut. They're going to have a more inflamed gut environment. We're seeing that with elevated histamine. If they've got any degree of small intestinal inflammation, villi damage, they're going to have impaired DAO production. We're seeing that with her. So I think that's a pretty fitting question for the case we're actually looking at,
Mhm. Yep. And just a quick reminder, since we are past the top of the hour, guys, tomorrow is going to be a doozy. The GI map is a long test. So if you want to nerd out with us, join us at 4 p.m. EST, 1 p.m. PST. Catherine asked, are blood and urine tests the only method by FDN to find problems? Oh, no, we take it all. We'll take your poop. We take saliva as well. And that's just in the foundational tests. Then the follow-up thing that Catherine asked is, do you do any other tests like DNA tests, etc.? So FDN has the foundationals, and no one is required to do that. You can do whatever you want after you graduate FDN, as long as it's within the scope of practice, but you can utilize whatever labs you want for the most part. I think if anyone went through the FDN course, a strong, strong, strong case is made for why you'd want to start with these. But again, we know some people will only get 60% better. So what's really cool about FDN is it almost self-corrects because we're not so arrogant as to say you're never going to need another test. We're just saying it's the best bang for your buck to start with these tests. So once you're in FDN, yeah, some FDNs do utilize DNA testing, and we have access to that. Some use hair tissue mineral analysis. We have access to that. Some use organic acids. I mean, I could list off 60 plus things here. there's a time and place. We just don't start with those. And again, a case could be made for that in the FDN course. I won't necessarily make that same case here, but one thing I always say is I don't know anyone else who has taken a lab or a set of labs and done it with 10,000 people and said, you know what? This is the one that seems to be working consistently. So that's just my opinion on that. All right, done with this one. Back to the chat. Here we go. Sorry for the delay, guys. All right. Um, I don't know what this was for. This was like 10 minutes ago, but someone said Evan's right. Thank you. I tell my fiance that all the time. Um, I'm so sorry, Evan. I'm a fellow acne sufferer too. So glad you found success through FDN. Yes, definitely a good thing. Yes, I have a program for low income people too. That's awesome. And that's a good thing to do, right? We can design our businesses in such a way that makes it work for us. We can do anything we want. So we can have things for everyone. There's a very, very successful FDN, like significant business. She does multiple six figures a year. And guess what she's doing with that money now? She opened up a nonprofit, right? So I'm not a dirty capitalist. Don't worry. I'm not a corporatist. But what I'm saying is what I said before, you can't pour from a cup that's empty. Okay. So you fill your cup and then you could start pouring out to everyone else. You're like a big old jug. Um, Upgrade. I cracked myself up at least, Courtney. Natalie said upgraded formulas also have a good detox product that I use. Awesome. It has been my experience that clients have to be invested in their success. I have learned that there always has to be an exchange. Down the road, the practitioner can become resentful when he or she is more invested in the client's success than the client. You haven't ever experienced something like that, Courtney, have you?
Oh my gosh. It's one of our hardest jobs is like, how do you determine when you're trying to like screen people if they're really vested in doing this work, right? Because we
Yep.
want it for them, but they have to want it just as much, if not more.
Susie said, asked, do you receive commissions from ordering from this lab? No, we do not. We are not lab test salespeople. Lab tests are a tool for us to use. Good question, because you should ask that, because if someone has a financial incentive, it's not that that's inherently bad, but I would be a little more skeptical and do more due diligence. So no, we are not lab test salespeople. They are a tool. What we do sell is our expertise. I charge for my time. Natalie says, definitely so very important to drink. Okay, this was sorry. Not that that wasn't good, Natalie, but that's just from another comment. 60% is awesome. See, this is people who have actually in this space and understand that being able to say consistently getting people to 60% is really good when they're chronically ill.
Mhm.
Um, what is the name of this test? I think they meant from before in the comments, but just in case they're talking about the one today, it's the MBA Mucosal Barrier Assessment by Fluids IQ. All right. A lot of comment. You guys are so nice to each other. This is great. They're just like having conversations. I apologize if I missed this being answered already. That's okay. I know the allergy sensitivity test is part of the training, but it seems like that is not one of the foundational tests. Is that correct? Jen, it just happens to be on day 5. It is one of our foundational tests, and we'll go over it on that day. And it's a lot easier to talk about that one. It's pretty quick overall. So that's why we have our protocols on day 5 as well. But no, you did not miss that. No worries. Uh, Dr. Kelly said, quote, it looks like she's quoting someone else maybe, I can't care more about your health than you do. Absolutely correct. That never works. How do you treat or shift fruit malabsorption? Thank you. Well, we don't treat anything specifically. We can help people self-treat. So just making sure I'm covering my bases there. But how would we help with fruit malabsorption, Courtney?
Fruit malabsorption. So I'm going to guess there's a degree of fructose malabsorption probably happening there, right?
Sure.
So I mean, we're actually kind of looking essentially at some of the markers potentially on this test, right? So a lot of times we're seeing intestinal villi damaged in that type of situation. So DAO can be a really good indirect marker that would tell us a lot about the health of the villi. So I mean, I think a lot of what we're trying to do in that type of situation is rebuild the health of the villi in the small intestine and improve upper GI function. So, again, we're going to get the clues from looking at all of the labs. We can't just know from just this one test, but it's this idea of identifying the factors that led to the intestinal lining damage and breakdown, what's causing, fructose not to absorb well and the villi to be blunted potentially, right? Is it that they just aren't producing enough stomach acid, enough enzymes, enough bile? Do they have dysbiosis that's, causing inflammation in the gut? So we'd have to work at some of those more foundational contributing weaknesses and just underlying factors to restore the health of digestion, restore the health of the villi, with the hope that that ability to absorb fructose would improve and come back online. I mean, if again, fruit, any type of fruit came up on the MRT, yes, that would be part of the strategy too, is to avoid that for at least 90 days, if not longer, right? To give the body a break and allow the immune system to kind of calm down and, not be so sensitized to that food.
All right, this is from before, and thank you, Mary and Mike Rasser, for correcting me on this. I knew I should have shut my mouth. That's why I asked you, Courtney, because I didn't think I was right. And they are correct. Wheat is not genetically modified commercially in America. So, however, farmers spray glyphosate on the crop 1 week before harvest to further dry out the wheat to make it easier to harvest. Okay, thank you. I thought I was wrong on that. I wouldn't have been surprised if they were doing that. Let's be fair, but fair enough. All right. I take binders to help pull all that. My body feels it uh that my body feels is disruptive to it. Yeah, binders can be very helpful. Definitely something that's more of a modern day thing, right? Not that binders weren't used, charcoal was used many years ago, but the regular use of binders is kind of a newer concept. And again, I think this is a pro and con thing. It's like the carnivore thing. Like, I'm not even saying it's bad, but like, would we have necessarily had to do that 100, 200 years ago? Probably not. Similar with the binders, would we have had to take all these binders just to feel normal sometimes? Probably not. And maybe these things have unintended consequences when we do it long term. I don't know, but we got to navigate today's world, guys. We got to do what we got to do. All right. Um, Sorry, guys. Look into glypho detox by Econugenics. Otherwise, humic and fulvic acid are good, but depends. You may need more specific chelators for specific toxins, i.e. bentonite clay, activated charcoal. Absolutely correct, Mary. Thank you for your great insights with this stuff. Dr. Mike said, nice, Evan. That was at 4:55. I don't know what I did, but thank you, Dr. Mike. We'll scroll back down here to the questions. All right. Did I miss the histamine to DAO ratio explanation? Laurel, you did. Is there a paragraph version of it, Courtney?
I could give just a recap if that's
Yeah,
helpful.
like a footnotes version? Sure.
Yeah, I mean, so we're basically looking at, is there enough DAO to hold histamine in check? And in this particular case, we're seeing high histamine, we're seeing DAO is starting to drop off. So, that's why we're starting to see the diamond creep closer to the red zone. So we know that, in Reese's case here, she's going to have more of an inflammatory environment because of the relatively higher histamine to DAO availability that's there.
Thank you. All right. I'm asking, someone asked about the day 2 replay. They said that's not up yet. If you're seeing the day 1 and can't see day 2, I don't think you're having any tech issues. It's probably not out, but I just asked the team if that's out yet. Okay. Susie said, just this weekend, my GF was struggling with cystic acne. Do you mind telling me what the key to your success was? Living a lot differently than most people. I'll put it that way. And Susie, I don't want to give you a lame answer. I did a podcast on this very recently, like literally last week on our FDN page. So I will send that in the links for you down below. Give me a second while Courtney answers another question. I'll throw it at her and then I'll get the link and put it in the chat for you. But that could be very useful for you. And I would definitely send it to your GF as well, because it could just inspire her to keep moving along. How do you regrow villi? Oh, great question. How do we regrow some villi on that gut?
Regrow villi. Well, lots of things. We have to get rid of the inflammatory triggers, and we have to improve upper GI function, and we have to identify, again, what's causing inflammation in the gut. So, I mean, again, these are multiple things all at the same time, but part of what we're getting from these foundational tests are, do we see a breakdown in upper GI function? If we're seeing signs of that, we definitely have to support that so that food is getting better digested. That starts to take the brunt off the small intestine so that there isn't all of this like undigested food particle going through, which is going to lead to more inflammation, lead to more of a blunted villi situation. Obviously, avoiding food triggers. I mean, I personally think wheat is probably the number one for most people. But any and all, and that's the beauty of running the MRT, is we're going to get anything that the client is currently having a reaction to, we're going to get a pretty clear-cut picture of that. So removing those things. If we're seeing signs of bacterial dysbiosis, opportunistic overgrowth, parasites, fungi, whatever on the GI map, we want to work on trying to help the body eradicate those infections, those hidden infections naturally. So we have strategies that we can use with natural products to do that. And then of course there's the lifestyle stuff. There's the whole stress reduction, there's optimizing sleep, right? Like how much of our body repairs when we sleep. Sometimes just a simple thing like that can be one of the hardest things for most people. Just getting clients to actually improve these, less sexy factors to the process, if you will, because we're just talking about lifestyle habits, really can go a long way. And so that's more of kind of the dress foundation that we work from as FDNs. But all of those things kind of collectively are going to help support intestinal villi back to health.
Awesome. Thank you. Susie said, and Susie, by the way, I have a link for you in the chat now for the YouTube video where I did the podcast on acne. It was a lot of things. And light was a huge role in this. I don't just mean red light therapy. Yes, that's great, but there's a lot to it. So I share that in there. I can't give you the secret sauce, unfortunately, in a full 1 hour podcast, but there's a lot of things there that you could act on. And then Susie asked something else. Once you sign up to be certified, can you go at your own pace, or are you given a lesson a day / week at a time? As I am a graduate of IIN, I think I may do well in not the 6 month time period I read somewhere on your website. Actually, Susie, I went through IIN before FDN, so I can totally tell you the difference here. IIN does release, well, at least when I went through, this is 8, 9 years ago for IIN at this point. But when I went through, they released like one module a week. That's kind of what they did. FDN is the opposite. We're completely self-paced, so you can go through as much as your schedule allows, which I really appreciated. That's not for everyone, but for me, that was great because I was super motivated to do it at the time. I remember I was such a nerd with this at like 20 years old. I'm going through IIN on a Friday night, like waiting for the module to get released. I'd finish it all before bed, and then I had to wait another week. Whereas like FDN, I could spend like 6, 7 hours a day doing this, really grinding it out. So it was really cool. And definitely, yeah, you could finish FDN in 6 months, but the average time right now is 8 to 9. Is the day 2 replay available yet? I see day 1, but not day 2. So, Kim, it is available on our Slack channel. It's not available on FDN Connect yet. I just confirmed that with the team. FDN Connect is being worked on right now, should be out within the next couple hours. If you'd like to access it right now after this, here is the link. I just put it for you below. You can get it on Slack. All right. Dr. Kelly, who is like the nicest person ever. You guys are all great, but Dr. Kelly's really trying to stand out. Dr. Kelly's been awesome every day. Courtney, thank you so much for your insight and expertise. You have such a great way of explaining complex issues, so much knowledge. I can see why FDN had you do this session. Thank you again for your time, preparation, presentation, and answers. I forgot to do that, actually. I always ask the audience, because they're like super nice, Courtney, to thank our presenter today. So if I could, if you guys don't mind, it'd be awesome if we could just say thank you to Courtney again. This is tough hopping on here. There's like 150 people live earlier today, man. That's nerve-wracking, especially when you got such smart people on, right? We got to be careful about what we say. I'm telling you, there's genetically modified wheat and there's none. So it's rough out here on Zoom, man. All right. What else we got? What happens at the 1 year mark if you sign up for the program? Do you lose access, or is that just the end of the active team support? Yep, we take your money and you are gone. No, I'm kidding, Margaret. At the 1 year mark, if you haven't finished yet, we do charge for an extension fee for about 6 weeks. I'm going to estimate higher than I know it to be because I forget what it exactly is. So I'm going to say it's like $230 for a 6 week extension. I'm positive it's less than that. I just forget how much less it is. So I apologize. And that's because you're in an active trainee group where you have direct access to the mentors. You can literally ask them questions and they're staffed. So that is what the extension fee is for. You can do that extension as many times as you want, but really, other than like major life circumstances or, with all due respect, just laziness, there's no reason that you can't finish within a year. If you just sat for 30 minutes a day for the year, you'd be pretty darn close. You'd be getting there. All right. What is IIN? It's an online certification course. It focuses more on like basic nutrition and coaching. It's a very good intro. If you're on something like this and resonating with the information, you're probably past that. Nothing wrong with their program, like I said, but you're probably past that. But it's a great intro for people into the space. Eleonora said the intestine is one of the highest regenerative organs, and villi are reconstituted easily with an anti-inflammatory diet. You are correct, my friend. They are some of the fastest regenerating cells in the body. I am so sorry I had to step away for a moment and I missed the 60% better in 90 days comment. Can anyone reiterate the gist? Yeah, Kara, I was just saying how no system is perfect, including FDNs. We're the only program that's going to tell you that directly, though. But what I can say, as someone who's done this for 8 years, I've never seen someone that has done all the foundational labs with me or my fiance gone through the protocols and not felt at least 60% better in 90 days. Now, 60% is not 100%, to be clear. And some of them get stuck at that 60%. But that's what's cool about the foundationals. And it puts the price into perspective. Because if I can take on a client, I can't say this to them because it's a claim. But if I know I'm like, yeah, there is a 100% chance I'm going to get you 60% better in 90 days, then I can ethically charge them that amount because I know it's worth it to them. All right. Thank you. Thank yous. Evan, I totally could see that you did radio in the past. Yeah, I got the face for it too, don't I? I got a new camera though, so that helps me out. But you guys got to see my real face with the iPhone. That is not good. They love Courtney, they said. Thank you, Courtney. Thank you for the session. Such a wonderful class. Thank you for all that has been. Do you carry business insurance? What does FDN recommend? We certainly do. And thankfully, our insurance is cheap because we don't screw up and we don't get sued. So it's like less than $300 a year. Do you carry insurance, Courtney? I guess I shouldn't put you on the spot with that. I hope you do.
Yeah. Oh, I do. Yeah. I think mine's through Alternative Balance, actually.
Early 20s have may or may not have carried insurance, and then your brain fully develops at 25. They say, and like, yeah, you know what, maybe that's something to do, maybe that is something to do. Thank you so much, Courtney and Evan, that was really great. Yes, you're welcome. Does FDN also go over different types of diets as part of its education, or is that learning separate? I know that either of us can answer this, but I'll throw it to you. Like, how do you explain the dietary approach that FDN takes?
Oh, that's a really good question, Evan. I actually feel like, and hopefully I'm not like speaking out of place here, but I feel like the emphasis of the program is much more so on testing, right? So, and again, my background before I became an FDN was a nutrition therapy practitioner, and I felt like that was a lot more diet heavy in terms of just like looking at food. We did a lot of like, looking into Weston A. Price's research, that type of thing. I mean, definitely diet has its own place within the FDN curriculum, and it's definitely taught, especially when we're going through like the MRT and that type of thing. But I guess it kind of just depends on, each individual and what their background is. If you've had, and I don't know if IIN went into diet quite a bit too. I never did that program, but I would
Mhm.
say for sure, if you've already got some sort of health coaching certification where you've covered diet, this will only add to that kind of repertoire. But, I think it kind of depends on just how deep you want to go with therapeutic diets and applying that to client cases, right?
Yeah, thank you. That's perfect. And IIN, like their whole shtick is that they teach like 100 dietary theories. So it can be
Yeah.
very useful for thinking objectively. I found it a little confusing personally. Again, I love them and I still recommend them to this day, but I found it confusing. I want to know what I'm doing with my clients. Uh, who do you use for insurance? Well, Dr. Mike, there's a variety of insurers that do support us in different parts of the world. So for US, Alternative Balance Professional Group and Locked in Affinity, and then there's other ones off for international that admittedly I don't know off the top of my head. I got here too late for the education piece because of a family emergency, but I'm so grateful for what you are presenting, and I'm learning so much just from the Q&A. Thanks, Margaret. That's what we like to do. That's like half the fun of the 5 and 5 is just saying, hey, you get access to our clinical advisors. We hold them hostage here for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and make them answer all your questions. Most FDNs use alternative balance insurance, says Tara. Thank you, Tara. I did not know that. So if you aren't dealing with diet, then how are you helping people to make lifestyle changes for better health? I'm confused. So if I can, Cordy, I'll specify this a little bit. Like
Yeah.
when we say we're not doing as much with diet, what we mean is we're not going to teach you at FDN, like, oh, this is what vitamin A does specifically, like these little micronutrient things. We are certainly assisting you in figuring out what a person generally should be eating. So, for example, let's take the food sensitivity test. The food sensitivity test that we use looks at 176 foods and food chemicals. So, immediately, I can already show you what's bad for you. Then on day 5, I haven't hinted at this yet because it's a confusing one until you see it. We utilize something called the metabolic typing diet, which is not a diet in and of itself. It's actually multiple things. And then it has a diet check record sheet for self correction. Again, this is confusing. That's why I was going to wait till day 5. But most of the recommendations on there, I'll word it this way, have a paleo ish feel to them with some modification. So we absolutely do cover this stuff. We cannot legally cover it in the way that like a dietitian covers it. We can't give out meal plans. We can certainly tell you what's bad and we can show you generally what's good. So this will, I promise, if you tune in for day 5, this will all make a lot more sense. Sabrina, I'm sorry if that was confusing. Susie said, well, IIN gave you health coach certification, but this looks like a lot more info. After you get that, you need a business model program. And this is what I see here. Yes, yeah. With all due respect to them, that'd be the way to word it. I actually really only went into FDN because my health challenges were not fixed through IIN alone, and thus I didn't feel comfortable charging other people to fix their health issues. So now they can't get rid of me. I'm on webinars. I'm like, how the heck did this happen? All right, going to some more questions. All right, someone said, if a food is eaten a lot, doesn't it show up as an allergen when really it is not?
That's a good question. So, from my understanding of this particular thing, the more we consume foods, the more there is the likelihood that the immune system could start to mount more and more of a reaction. So there is, in my experience, correlation with that. Now, will a test like the MRT give us a food erroneously as an allergen or a sensitivity? No, that's not the way that that test is designed to work. And that's something I think that you guys are going to go into detail on, right, Evan, on that
Mhm.
particular day.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So um, now I would personally say that there's always the possibility that there are components to foods that go beyond immune reactions that could make them intolerable to a given individual. You know, things like FODMAPs or lectins or phytates or other components that can be, you know, difficult to digest and cause digestive symptoms or just issues with certain people. So, you know, I guess I'm kind of getting into a whole nother layer here, but point being, in my experience, you're not going to get false positives on, you know, a test like the MRT. However, the more that you consume a food, the more that it could potentially cause more of an immune reaction, just because, again, depending on the state of the gut, if there's a lot of leaky gut, if your body's seeing it frequently, that could cause more immune titers to show up to it for sure.
Yes, ma'am. Follow up cue on the diet. I won't keep you here forever, Courtney. I promise. We'll
It's
probably
all
wrap
good.
up
It's
in the
good.
next 5 minutes or so. Follow up cue on the diet. Do you take clients who are vegan versus carnivore, or is that a restriction? I'm asking because it's so hard to help a vegan client with leaky gut versus paleo or carnivore. So, uh, Lydia, no one can tell anyone what to do with their business, right? So, a lot of FDNs do not take vegan clients. As shocking as this is, in 8 years, I have never had someone come to me to work with me as an active vegan, which I still do not understand. I have never had that somehow. Um, Kurt yesterday, he actually talked about this. So Kurt will take someone. I'm sorry, he didn't talk about this yesterday. I interviewed him for something else recently, and he said he will take clients that are vegan and he'll meet them where they're at. And he'll just tell them, I don't know if I can help you as much as I could help someone that's willing to maybe incorporate some animal products, but we'll damn well try and we'll do what we can. Certainly, I can support you in some way. So that is completely up to you. I think to me, it would be very circumstantial. I would want to know why the person's doing it. You know what I mean? Because I was actually vegan for about 9 months at one point. I love animals. Like I'm not like a cruel person, but I admit I was not necessarily doing it for that reason. I was just doing it to try to get healthy. So if I had someone like that coming to me, I'm like, oh, this person isn't biased one way or the other. They're just trying to do what they can. So I'll take them on. If it was truly a major ethical thing for them, well, we run into a few issues. What are we going to do? Force meat on them? Because now that's going to cause a new stress, right? That's a psychological stress if they believe they're doing the wrong moral thing. And we're trying to reduce stress. So I think that's completely up to you. I don't think you're a bad person. If you don't work with those types of clients, that's totally fair. You could refer them to someone else who does. So FDN doesn't promote it one way or the other, to be clear. Like, we're not saying that you can't work with a vegan. If you go through the FDN course, it is definitely a course that promotes animal nutrition. That's fair to say. All right. What else we got? What else we got? A lot of people saying thanks to everyone. This is like everyone here must be healthy. You guys don't have inflamed brains. There are no troll comments. Everyone's nice. Really great people here. Okay, it looks. Jen said, I've been vegan for many, many years. I recently started eating fish again, but otherwise eat plant based. And that's cool, Jen. I'm very glad that's working for you. And this is something I actually don't share that often publicly, but when I was younger, my parents have like 3.5 acres, and I saw my dad hunting outside when I was a kid. And I know that kids are a little bit different than adults, obviously, anyway. But there's some kids. I see pictures on Instagram sometime. My friends have kids now, and they're hunting with their dad, and they love it. I saw that, and it was awful. I thought it was the worst thing in the world. And so, probably the biggest known example of cognitive dissonance that I experience on a daily basis is the fact that I would not go out and hunt, and yet I eat like grass-fed beef all the time. I can't deny that it works for my health, but I totally respect you, Jen, and other people that do it. I wish that I could get my health to where it's at now while not doing it. That's me personally. Courtney, thank you for coming on here and just having a great time. How many of you guys are going to be on tomorrow? Let me know if you guys will make it till day 4. We would love to see you again. Remember, we're going over the GI map with Brendan Vermeyer. This guy has like 275 IQ. I'm kidding. I know that's not possible or done yet, but he is up there, man. You guys are going to absolutely love it. He's a perfect person for that test. I see everyone coming in for day 4 tomorrow. Now, the real champions will make it till day 5 on Friday. I hope you guys aren't going out and doing anything crazy. You need to nerd out with us on some food sensitivity test labs. But I'm looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. Courtney, any final words of wisdom?
Oh boy, final words of wisdom. No, but I can just say that if you decide to do this program, it will change your life. Like, I feel like this has been a game changer for my practice and just my level of knowledge. And once you learn these foundational tests, you have a way of thinking that you can apply to any other functional test you decide to familiarize yourself with. So it's great. It's like the knowledge just kind of augments and multiplies.
And I'm guessing with this nice audience, would you come back for another live 5 and 5 one day?
Oh, absolutely.
Awesome. All right, cool. We will see you guys tomorrow. Thank you so much for another fun day. I hope you guys have a great afternoon, evening, morning, wherever you're tuning in from. Thanks, Courtney.
Thank you.